Listeners out there in the multiverse, you are listening to the Earth 16 Comics Wire podcast on the Daily Planet. I'm your host, Brian of Earth 16, and with me today, I have the creator of Heavens Decoded and the creator of Cypher Comics, Rony. How do you say your last name?
It's Lescouflair. It's Lescouflair. The S is pronounced.
Lescouflair.
Yeah.
Dude, it's just like Ric Flair.
Some people they call me Orion Zulu. That's my nickname. So that's the name that I go by on social media. But yes, that's my name. How
Awesome.
you doing?
I'm doing very good. Welcome to Earth 16.
Man, thanks for having me on, man. I've been excited about doing this for a long time.
Yeah, I'm really excited about your comic, Heavens Decoded, and that you're doing a Kickstarter on this. It looks really cool. I mean, when I looked at the comic, it felt like it was like some Stargate, Indiana Jones vibes, you know?
Right. That's kind of like what I was going for. It's a cross between Green Lantern, Indiana Jones, and Jason Bourne. There's a lot of intellectual, international spy intrigue that we're going to get into later on, as the story develops. But there's a lot of science fiction, but there's a lot of sort of, I wouldn't say social commentary, but we delve into space cultures and how basically these cultures are sort of they could be sort of a mirror image of things that we experience here on Earth. It's just basically to show that maybe we're not as unique as we think we are, and that maybe some other cultures out there could be going through something similar. But there's no political agenda or statement in any of this. It's just all just good science fiction fun. I just wanted to draw back on my '80s upbringing, and bring science fiction fun back. That kind of feeling you got from
Yeah.
blockbuster movies in the summertime when you went to go see a movie and it was action, it was humor, there was a little bit of a drama, there was intrigue, and that's what I kind of want to bring to the table again. This is like I want to say this is another. I don't want to use a name because it's a comparison that I think is kind of crazy and arrogant, but I want to say it's like Star Wars for a new generation because as we know, Star Wars has kind of come to a close with the trilogies.
Yeah.
I kind of just wanted to put something else out there in the creative sphere for other people to sink their teeth into to give them an idea of maybe there's other types of properties that fans can get into that are sci-fi that can be just also as exciting.
Awesome. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, especially with, there's so many stuff out there. And also with several it's like with Star Wars, like you said, coming to a close, and then also you have Star Trek that was like that
Hmm.
came before it, and all these other science fiction platforms like Babylon 5 I heard was another good one. It was kind of like a
Hmm.
Casablanca in space,
Right,
which I
right.
thought was really interesting. I think it was created by Michael J. Straczynski.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, really good stuff. So we're gonna
So, and
get go ahead.
Heaven's Dakota really is what I'm really trying to get into here is this guy. He's an archaeologist, and he has a passion for symbols and languages. So he's a big key of the story. He's a big part of the story, but Heavens Decoded really is a springboard, and I think hopefully we might cover this later, but it's a springboard into the Cypher Comics universe. What that means is, while this main character, Dr. Rockland, he is the main character, he's not the only important character. So that was the challenge that I had in the creative process was how do I let people know that he's the main character, but at the same time open up some other avenues for creative ventures later on with the story. Heavens Decoded isn't just about this character; it is a springboard to opening up the universe. So there's a lot of actually, I would say, Easter eggs in the stories.
Uh-huh.
There's three parts. I would say about 2 years from now, people are going to go back and look through the series and say, "Oh, yeah, this is where that started." So I am sneaking them in, and people will just have to pay attention. And probably someone will ask me about it 2 years from now and say, I knew that was something. I knew that meant something." But yeah, that's what Heaven's Dakota really is. It's an introduction to many interesting characters that will be the basis and the foundation of a new universe.
Wow, so you're not only creating a comic, but you're also creating an entire universe.
That's correct. Heaven's Dakota is the springboard. Yep.
Man, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, really excited to, see someone create their own universe, just like, George Lucas creating the Star Wars universe or the Indiana
Right.
Jones universe, and just having all these characters branch out. And speaking of the characters, one of my favorite characters in Heaven's Decoded is his name is like I think it's he's like the British one, the British character. It's Colin, I think it is.
Yeah, Lieutenant Colin Foster.
Colin Foster. He is one funny dude, man. Like I just
Yeah.
he has that James Bond wit, but he's just like
Yeah.
James Bond who he's just like a James Bond who has his own family, but then at the same time though it just yeah.
Yeah, he's a mess. I think he's probably the most challenging character that,
Mm-hmm.
I would love to sit here and tell you that he's a completely finished product because he's not. And what I mean by that is that his story hasn't been told yet. But I think you just alluded to something that we had talked about previously that yes, he does have he has a history with family. He has a history with abusing alcohol. And so he's kind of come off of that. He's kind of he's been through recovery. He's paid the price for some of his mistakes and choices in life, but he does have a family. But you said James Bond. That's an interesting sort of analogy because that's how I imagined him at first. But then I realized he's really not that. He's actually more of a rough and tumble kind of a rugby soccer fan. He's the kind of guy who likes to go and have a pint at the bar and hang out with the guys. He's the kind of guy who'll get into a fight. So he seems refined, but he really is more of a rough and tumble kind of a guy. He's a tactical expert. He likes explosives and guns, and he's a fanatic about war, World War II history. So him and Reggie, because Reggie is an archaeologist and he likes history as well, they
They
kind
make good
of
friends.
yeah, they make good friends because they like history a lot. Although the one thing that's I would say the caveat with that friendship is that Reggie's a pacifist. Dr. Rockland is a pacifist, or he's become a pacifist, and that's the interesting part about Reggie is his background. But yeah, so they're kind of on divergent paths. Reggie's kind of trying to go away from the violent lifestyle, and we kind of touch on that in part one.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, and but Colin is all about it. He'll get into a fight in a heartbeat.
So he's the type of guy who wouldn't be afraid to like shoot first and ask questions later, kind of a
Absolutely. He's a little bit more reckless. I wouldn't go say loose cannon. He's not to that degree because he is a high-ranking member of this space organization called PRISM. He's right underneath Colonel Annie Morneau. So he's high-ranking and he takes his job seriously. So he's not as loose of a cannon as he used to be, but he still can. He probably say maybe a bit of a short temper at times. But he,
I
he
can
really he respects his job and he really loves what he does. But yeah, he probably can be somebody. I think he's going to be a very interesting character going forward. I'm really going to enjoy building and morphing him and sort of exposing his story to the rest of the people.
yeah, and you touch a lot on Reggie, and like he's based on a buddy of yours who was also named Reggie.
Yeah, that's right. So the genesis of this entire project of Cypher Comics, in fact, was I decided to get back into comics because I had left the comics industry completely. Like I'm talking even collecting comics. I wasn't even going to local comic shops for like I want to say 20 years, I think.
Dang.
Yeah, I had some bad experiences with comic fans in general. I was a reader at the time, and I wasn't making comics, but I sort of became a little disenchanted with the way that people were viewing comics at the time, and I guess you can call me a little old-fashioned. Okay, fine. I like superheroes, okay, and I started noticing there was a lot of venom towards superhero comics in the mid '90s, and that kind of pushed me away from comics a little bit. I lost I would say I lost the desire to make comics. I think life, I got married, I had a kid, and so a lot of things happened, and
Oh yeah.
I went into a different path. I became like a party animal, and I was a nightclub promoter, and I lived a completely different lifestyle. Now I'm married again, and I have a kid, so I'm more living the family life now. But I think about I want to say 7, 8 years ago, I got a call that one of my childhood friends, Reggie, had passed away. He was about a year older than me, so that kind of impacted me a little bit. And the story behind Reggie is that Reggie and my older brother were the two largest influences in my comic, I would say my comic fandom. I started in comics around 7 or 8 years old. I didn't really know much about them, but I would go to Reggie's house and he had a room full of comics. And
Wow.
obviously, if you're 7 years old, who doesn't love to read Superman, Batman, Spider-Man? I mean, that stuff was all over the room. So I was like, he's falling asleep 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm just shuffling through pages. I'm like, wow, this is cool. Like, there's actual stories here. because up at 7 years old, my knowledge of comics at that time was Super Friends. Everybody, we couldn't wait to wake up on Saturday morning to watch Super Friends, and
Exactly.
that was my knowledge of comics. I didn't know anything about these heroes at all. I didn't know they had actual personal lives and they had struggles that they dealt with in their daily life. These things were interesting to me. For 7, 8 years old, this blew me away. And so I started realizing that, wow, stories are interesting. And that's where my writing started, actually, just in general, wanting to write and create. But it started with Reggie. And then when I found out that he passed away, it impacted me. It brought me back to a place of, I felt like, I talked to him when I was a kid about making my own comics one day. It was a fantasy of mine. It was a dream. And I kind of sort of forgot about it. I did write a little bit when I was 14 to 15, and I kind of just stopped. But when he passed away, it made me realize, like, wow, I still can write. I can try. So I was a little rusty and started writing some stories, and I didn't like them, but I said, I kind of owe it to Reggie to just try, just try. I said maybe Reggie would be happy
Yeah.
if I did that. Yeah. So in actuality, the character Reggie wasn't originally based on Reggie. It was based off of a superhero character that I created many, many years ago called Shine Shadow.
Shine
That's a
Shadow.
revelation to
Wow.
you. I never actually told anybody this story before. But Shine Shadow was another character I created when I was a kid, and so I decided that I wanted to make a character off of that superhero. And then it morphed. It changed. Reggie is not that guy. He's not Shine Shadow. It became a different character completely, a different backstory. When I met the artist, I had one origin, and before I could actually send him the plot of what I did, I decided I didn't like the origin, so I had to start from scratch. And that's why Heavens Decoded took 2 years, because when I first met him, I had already had one origin story written, and I didn't like it. It was a little bit cheesy, so I had to start everything from scratch again. And so he was very patient, and I threw ideas at him, and he said, "Yeah, try this, try that. Let's see what that looks like." And little by little, I started forming pieces of what Heavens Decoded was going to be. And I liked the character. I wanted to be somebody who was a scientist. I wanted somebody who was going to be a person who was going to figure things out. If you play video games, I know I saw your Twitch profile. You like games like I do, so I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure you're familiar with Nathan Drake.
Oh yeah,
Um,
from the Uncharted.
I love Uncharted. I love games like that. But I also like. I played DC Universe Online. I don't know if you ever played that game before,
I
but I
I played
love
it
games.
here and there.
Yeah, I like games where or anything, not even just games, but even just puzzle games. Like I can play,
Or tabletop. Yeah.
crossword puzzles, like I like putting things together. And one thing that I thought about with this character is I wanted to make him somebody who used his mind, because it's very important in today's society that we're not just, and I'm not trying to bash anybody else's comics, but I see a lot of black characters in the diaspora. When I look in social media, I see a lot of black characters. They're all muscular. They're all super hyper aggressive, and they show them punching people. And I thought about it, and I said, why don't we have a black Indiana Jones? Why don't we have a black professor? I know we do have some. I mean, I'm not saying that we don't. I think, if I'm correct, Black Lightning. I know that the TV show. Isn't he
Yeah,
like
he's
a
like a
TV?
t. I think he's like a principal or something.
He's a principal, right? Like, see, I think we need more images like that. I'm not saying that we can't have other ones. I just think we need to have a balance.
Yeah, like more
And
representation. Yeah.
that's all it is. And just maybe a variety also. And then, so I just don't feel comfortable promoting and advancing the idea that every black character has to be hyper aggressive and hyper violent.
That
And
makes sense.
that's kind of like where I came to. It was a little bit of my own personal stories back in his backstory, but not to give everything away. But Reggie basically has a history that makes him become a pacifist. He's a person who's been reformed. He's a sort of a kid who was a bad kid, and he becomes this sort of recluse. He becomes a bookworm in high school, and then he slowly starts to transform into this person who's fascinated by symbols. He's fascinated by languages. He's fascinated by hieroglyphics, and then he transforms from that person to being top third of his class, and he ends up going to Harvard, and then he ends up in Oxford. So
It's amazing.
he becomes a scientist, and I think that was important to me to send a message to young kids. And I don't care what race you are, but that you can be one thing. It doesn't mean that has to define you. He was one thing at one time, and then he decided he wanted to go a different path. And so that's why I mentioned Indiana Jones, because we know he's a professor, and he chasing things and artifacts around the world and
Beating up
stuff like that.
Nazis.
beating up Nazis.
My type of hero. I do not like Nazis,
Exactly.
man.
And I mean, I just thought that, instead of just making a hero who's got superpowers, why not make him somebody who uses his mind as well? Like, we all love
Uses
Batman.
mine, yeah.
Everybody loves Batman, right? Because Batman is prep time and he researches things and he figures out what his opponent's weaknesses are. And that's the kind of stuff that I think people really like. That's what engages people. And so I thought I wanted to make a character that represented my personality I wasn't a thug in high school, and I didn't go around beating up people. So I was a nerd. So I made a character that was kind of like me.
Yeah.
And he's kind of a book smart guy. He likes science. He likes information. He likes facts. He likes history. And so it only makes sense that I made a character like that. And then I just gave him the name Reggie. So I didn't really make the character pattern after Reggie's personality per se. I made a character and then I gave him Reggie's name I would say as an homage to my friend because it's a comic book character, but I was inspired to do it because of Reggie. Because he left too early. He left too early. I mean, he was 44 years old.
Yeah,
Um,
man.
it was diabetes, so he passed away in his sleep. So
That's
yeah,
wow.
it was shocking because and then the other thing is just on a personal note, I had saw him I want to say a year and a half before that. I hadn't seen him in many years. It's one of those things where you have a childhood friend, you lose contact. You think you're close to
Yeah.
people, but as everybody gets older, we kind of do our own thing, right? And the lesson of all this is don't take things for granted.
Yeah,
He
definitely.
he was at my mother's house, and I saw him one day, and I hadn't seen him in years, and I didn't know how to talk to him anymore. We weren't the same people anymore, and I could tell he was trying to talk to me, but he didn't know how either. It was kind of like really awkward. It was uncomfortable because we were these kids that were really, really super close. And all of a sudden, 10, 15 years later, we didn't know we were sitting in a room together watching TV, and we didn't know what to say to each other. And so,
Dang.
I don't want to promote this picture that it was all, roses. It was not an easy relationship in the sense of he was living his own life in Boston and I was in Florida and I was living a completely different life. But, obviously I still cared about him. His family and my family are still close. But when I found out that it happened, it made me realize at that moment that I had taken that moment for granted. That moment that I was sitting in the room with him, I had that moment to say all the things that I wanted to say, but I didn't say them. And so now he's gone. So I feel like I owed something to him. I feel like I let that moment pass and I shouldn't have let it pass. So I felt like when I came back to comics and I found out he passed away, I felt it was the right thing to do was to make the character and name it after him. It was my way of saying I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I wasn't there for you. I didn't know that you were having diabetes. I didn't know the situation was that bad. I don't know. I don't really know how lonely he was or if he was in a good state of mind or not. I wish that I had done more. I wish I had communicated with him and said, "Hey, how you doing? What's going on?" Or "Did you see Iron Man? What did you think of Iron Man 2?" Those are conversations that we could have had because I know he liked that stuff. He was going to our Marvel movies and all the DC movies, and those are things that we probably still had in common. But I didn't reach out when I had those opportunities, and I regret it now. So this was my way of sort of paying him back. Because if it wasn't for Reggie, I wouldn't be into comics today.
Wow, man. That's I didn't wow. I mean, talk about like I mean, I guess I mean maybe this is a wrong phrase. I mean, maybe it was like a come to Jesus moment.
Yeah, you're right. No, it's the right phrase. That's what it was. In actuality, it recentered me. It's sad to say that, but it made me realize that I had spent years not being myself. And what I mean by that is recentered me in a sense that it took me years to figure out that at heart, I'm still a writer. I wanted to
Oh
write since I was
yeah.
and by the way, I wrote poetry. I don't know if you read the bio in the Heavens to be Decoded, in this little book right here. In the bio, in here about me, basically, I actually was a story writer. I was a poet. I used to write poetry. That works with the girls too. Trust me, guys. Write poetry. I used to write poetry. I was a rapper. I thought I was going to be a rapper one day, and I rapped up until I was about 21, and I became a dad, and I let that go. But I've always enjoyed writing, whether it's songs, poetry, or if you're talking about writing comics or you're writing fiction, whatever it is. It's always about storytelling. If you're a rapper, it's storytelling. If you're Bob Dylan, it's storytelling. It's always about telling a story. And
Oh
so
yeah.
in the end, I realized life came full circle. And what that means is when I met Reggie and we were talking about comic books, it was about stories. That's what I enjoyed about the comic books was the stories, and I wanted to do that. I wanted to recreate that. I want to say, wow, that's so cool. How do they do that? How did they make the artist draw that? How does the artist know what to draw? How do they know what to say? Like that stuff fascinated me. So then I had to figure out how do they make comics. And then that book, How to Make Comics the Marvel Way. Everybody had that book, that big ass.
Yeah,
Everybody got that. I got that
the
too.
Marble
Everybody got it.
Method.
Yeah, the Marvel Method. I got that too when I was 12. I mean, and I've been fascinated about how comics are made, the process. The writer goes to the penciler goes to the inker, then the letter, then the color. Like, I was fascinated by it. And then I left it. I walked away from comics, and then here I am right back in comics again. So the moral of the story is, be true to yourself.
Oh
I got
yeah.
away from being a writer. I tried to do a bunch of other things, but the fact of the matter is, at heart, I'm a writer. And that's how I'm back here. And Reggie made me realize that again. So that's why I had to name the character Reggie.
It's like, yeah, that's like a really cool homage in a sense. I mean, also just a reminder that, that part of yourself that was always inside that you've forgotten.
I
Like,
buried it. I buried it.
yeah. I mean, I think it has a lot to do with self-love too. And this is what my younger sister always talks to me about all the time. Wherever I'm at my lowest of lows, she always tells me, remember, you always got to love yourself no matter what. And
Yes.
that totally rings true because if you love yourself, people are gonna other people are gonna love you, and it's just that's true, to the core.
I'm gonna break a rule. I'm gonna break a rule now. You kind of gave me some hints about what some questions might be. Some of these I wasn't expecting. You did surprise me. But one question you did ask me, and because we're talking about love, one question you did ask, where you said you might bring it up, is what was Heaven's Decoded about? And my answer actually was going to be that. It took me a while to figure it out. Heaven's Decoded actually is, drum roll, it's about love. Heaven's
Wow.
Decoded is about love. I know it's not the answer you expected, but it's funny because you said that, and that made me think that's what I was going to talk to you about. Heaven's Decoded is about love, and what I mean by that, I don't mean Heaven's Decoded as love is like romance love. I don't mean like rom-com love. I mean love about love of humanity, love of ourselves, love of life.
Yeah.
So we're talking about appreciation is what we're talking about. We're talking about not taking things for granted. That's what Heaven is Decoded. Ultimately, when people figure it out, it'll be part one, part two, part three. I think after part three, people are going to realize what it's about. I'm not going to tell you guys exactly what that means, but by part three, the ending, people will understand. They'll understand everything, and it will come back to them, and they'll say, yeah, he was right. It's about love.
Wow, I like that. It kind of sounds poetic in a sense.
Hmm.
And like I can kind of see little bits of little bits of that too with some of the characters, with for instance, there was this part I feel like with there was this one part I read in the first part of the comic where it was between Growlithe and Terran,
Hmm.
and you can tell that they had history,
Yes,
and
they do.
that for some reason Growlithe is up to something. We can spoiler alert for those who haven't read the comic yet. Like he is up to
Yes,
something. Like
yes.
something is up, and he's seemingly working with Kron and Raz. I mean, I don't know if he's a double agent or whatever, but I think at one time, he and Terran shared something, but then what happened was just that Terran turned him down, and then that she was more dedicated to her cause, and I guess
Mhm.
in a sense that was her love
Yes,
of
her love,
her
exactly.
own people.
Her love is her people, her culture. Yes.
Yeah, to the preservation of her civilization. Whereas with Grouse, he's more like he's kind of a little more disillusioned, if you will. I
That's a
feel.
good word. And speaking on Taryn, her love is it's also about her love of her responsibility. She has a love of her obligation.
Like her duty.
Yeah, it's not a job for her. It's something that she feels it's an honor for her to do it. So she takes it very seriously. Yeah, it's love.
And I feel like too, like one of the questions I wanted to ask too, speaking of that, is that what brings Reggie, Colin, Annie, Taryn, and all these other characters together?
When you say brings them together, um, no, it's not that. There's a little bit of a story behind, so we don't want to give away stuff in the story, obviously, but what brings them together is circumstances that was not completely planned, and Taryn is just basically trying to make the best of a situation that she didn't expect. Um, But to give you guys a little bit of a background, it feels like if you're reading the book, you're going to say, well, it feels like there's aliens out there that know about Earth and they know about humans. Well, the fact of the matter is they do. I think most of us probably feel that way. Most of us
Yeah.
probably feel that way just watching YouTube, or if you're Google, if you're on Facebook, you probably have an idea that maybe most of these videos are fake. 99.9% of them are fake. Sorry to tell you guys. As much as I love sci-fi, I don't think we've been visited that many times. Have we been visited? I don't know. I'm not really a scientist, but I will tell you that common sense will tell you out of a billions of stars out there, we're not the only ones with intelligent life. Does that mean that they've been here? I don't know. Does that mean that they will come here? I don't know. But the idea that we're the only living, existing, intelligent life out there amongst the stars, personal opinion, not speaking for the Heavens Decoded as a book, but just my personal opinion, it's crazy to think that we're the only ones out there. Now, what that means is this race of people that Terran and Growlithe are from, they're supposed to be highly scientifically advanced people, which means that they probably have access to knowledge that we don't understand and we can't understand. So they probably not only know about intelligent life in our system, they're aware of other forms of intelligent life other places. And again, this is sci-fi fantasy. So what are we saying? Are we saying that Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader exist? No, we don't think they exist. We know they don't exist. But we know that it's sci-fi fantasy, so we accept it. And that's what this is. This book is based off of reality, but it's not reality. There's nothing in Heaven's Decoded that says we know for a fact that there's aliens out there.
Well, I mean,
I also want to say, I want to pat myself on the back here. I need to say this. I have to say it. I've been waiting to say it for months. I created PRISM, a space organization, paramilitary response to intergalactic security matters. I came up with that idea way before our former president thought of the Space Force. I just want to make
yeah,
that
I was
absolutely
gonna say
clear.
that.
I want to make
The
that
Space
absolutely
Force,
clear.
yeah.
I was working on my book, and I turned on the news one day, and I hear Donald Trump come on and say that they're doing the Space Force, and I damn near threw my phone across the room. I said, "Son of a bitch!
It's almost like
Son of
he
a
reached in,
bitch!"
right? Like he almost like
Yeah,
reached in your
I
head,
was
just
like,
went whoop,
I was like, all right, they're watching my computer. This is bullshit. So, but I want to be kind of clear about this. Prism really is not a, because I think people are going to ask about this. It's very important. Prism is I wouldn't say run by the United Nations, but they're endorsed by the United Nations, which means that they work underneath the purview of the United Nations, but not all the nations agree and are involved in PRISM. What that means is that there's like 11 nations that are involved in the funding of PRISM. So it's not all member nations that are involved. However, there's the citizens of basically every country on Earth can join PRISM. So they're an international organization, but they're sort of private. If you want to think of like, I don't know, one of these sort of private military organizations that they have here, they send them to the Middle East. It's sort of the same concept, except they're sending them in space.
it's
So if
almost
you
like
want to think
Shield.
of, yeah, well, and also they're contractors. I mean, you can think of it as contractors, basically. Shield, yeah, I would say Shield is similar to that, absolutely. This is a little bit different because there is a lot of political sort of tugging because there's people who don't really know what Prism does. And basically, one of the main characters in the book, she's a very important part of the series actually, is Secretary Isabel Mendoza. I think you were going to ask me about her. She's kind of like the chess master. I'm giving some things away here, but she's the chess master and pretty much in this, at least so far in the universe. She's not just in this book. She's going to be a main character going forward, even after the series. She's an important part. She knows a lot, and that's all I'm going to say. She knows a lot, and she's involved in a lot of stuff. She's also covering for things that she doesn't want these countries to know about what PRISM is doing. So if that makes any sense, she has PRISM doing things that she doesn't want Earth to know about. So
I
she has
mean,
her own agenda.
I like those kind of characters too, who are just they're like subtle characters, but they're kind of like the ones who I feel are like they're like the chess players of the story, if you will. Like they
Yeah.
know they when you see like a master chess player, you don't really know his or her moves and all that.
Right.
They're like a couple moves ahead of you, and you don't even
Right.
know it. Like those kind of
Yeah.
characters I like. Like if you've seen Falcon and the Winter Soldier, for instance, like
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
like Helmut Zemo. Like he is just a
Yeah.
crazy strategist, and
Right.
you're
He's
like, man,
always two steps ahead.
he's
Yeah.
always two
That's
steps ahead.
And that's what Isabel is. Isabel has her own agenda, and whether we reveal what that is going forward, I haven't completely decided. I have an idea, but I do know that people will see that she's more powerful than people think, and that she knows a lot of information. And Prism was not made by accident. What I mean by that is she had a hand in it and she has an agenda. So that's going to be very interesting. I really hope people really are really going to get into this story because, like I said, Heavens Decoded is a springboard to this universe. It's not just about this one or two characters, but there's a lot of intrigue in terms of interrelationships, personal relationships that are either going to be built and formed, and some are going to be frayed. You already mentioned Gallus and Terran, but that may not be the only relationship that may get frayed. But I'm not going to tell you more than that.
My lips
Yeah.
are sealed.
Huh?
Lips are sealed. It's like
Lips are sealed. Yep. Yep. I don't know how many people are going to see this, so I got to be careful what I say.
you're right. And yeah, so that's really awesome. And I wanted to kind of touch base on like when you said that, like of course it's with stories like this where it's like of course it's about fate, it's not really, the fact
It's
that
sci-fi fantasy. Yeah.
yeah, but at the same time though I feel like it's like going back to my sister again. She
Mm-hmm.
told me something really interesting, like even though these stories are fiction, right? There is some truth to them,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
about what about the stories that they tell, like in terms of the storytelling there is actual truth. I mean, you look
Yeah.
at again like with Heavens Decoded, for instance, there's some truth that it's possible that there could be some life out there that we don't know about, maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
And do you trust whatever powers that may be, whatever your faction you come from or what
yeah,
you represent, do you trust government agencies to share that information? I'm not talking about UFOs landing. I'm talking about, just as an example, let's just say they had information, they had a piece of an artifact somewhere where they said, we know that this is not from Earth. Are you absolutely sure that they would tell us about it? Or if they did, that they would tell you where it is, or what it means, or where
that's a
it
good
came
question.
from,
Yeah, they
or
probably
when
wouldn't.
if they admitted it came from space, would they say it landed here 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago? Would they tell you the truth? Would you even know? I mean, so there's a lot of things that I don't think we really ever really know. And I think that for me as a writer, that's fascinating. It gives me a lot of clay to play with. So that's what I kind of did. I used a little bit of reality and what's out there, and I pulled it in from different sources to create something else. But none of these are things that I say I quote unquote believe. It's just done for fun, for creative purposes. And even Prism, to a certain degree, I had to use them as a vehicle. I needed something to connect Earth with space, so I came up with this organization.
The narrative
That
bridge.
Right, and I'm gonna give a little bit of I would say a spoiler. There's a hint in this book because I was asked about it. I think it wasn't by you, it was somebody else. It was another writer who was I'm kind of talking and working with a little bit on some future projects, and he had read the script and he said, "So have we made contact with aliens?" And we had first contact because he said his impression from Prism is that the way that they were reacting in some pages in the book is that, or the way they were talking, that they didn't seem very surprised. And I said, that should be kind of obvious. I'm really basically stating that Prism is hiding things. That's what Prism actually does. Their purpose is to find things and hide it from people on Earth. That's what their job is. Their job is to find artifacts, find information, if there is, but if they find it, it's to conceal it, and see what they can take advantage of it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean in an evil way take advantage of it. It means maybe it's something that could be dangerous. It could be something that could have chemical,
If it goes to the wrong hands, yeah.
yeah, if it goes to the wrong hands. So this also could be for security purposes, which is again paramilitary response to intergalactic security matters. If it's a security threat to Earth, then Prism should probably have their hands on it before it falls into, hand of X nation. Leader of X nation on Earth gets their hands on it. It can turn it into a weapon of mass destruction. So that would be the purpose of why Prism would keep it, not, for some sort of an arrogant desire to just keep it because they think they're important, but it's just more of, to keep everybody safe. So yeah, that could be twisted and turned into whichever perspective you look at it. It could be turned into something evil, but some people might say it's a good thing that they're doing it. You know what I
Wow.
mean?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it just there's a whole justification of like why people hide things or governments keep secrets or yeah,
Right.
like they say it in the name of protecting others.
And that's what I think is kind of interesting about Prism is I don't really portray them as angels. From the beginning, I'm letting people know that they're hiding things. I
I mean,
mean,
it's
it's obvious.
gray. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not really black and white per se, but
exactly,
it's a gray
exactly,
area.
exactly. And that's where the political intrigue comes in. What does Isabel know? Does she know about this? Why is she doing it? Why is she allowing it? Is she allowing it? So there's a lot of questions that may or may not be answered in this series.
Yeah,
I don't
unless
think
you
I
know
want.
too
I don't think I
much.
want to give it
Yeah.
away yet. I don't think I want to give it away yet.
Oh
I think
no.
she's interesting. There's a whole lot more to her that I'm not going to get into now, but some interesting things about her personality. She's kind of a she's an escape from what the idea of what a UN Secretary General should be. She's a different personality, which I think is that makes her fascinating alone, honestly.
Well, I mean, we touch on a lot of like the characters, especially Colin and Reggie,
Right.
and Colin's past too. Are we going to see flashbacks of like Colin's past as a young man, or him growing up?
I'm so glad you brought that up. I don't want to tell people exactly what's going to happen in part two and three, but I will say that Heaven's Decoded, the limited series that I'm working on here, I really do want to continue. That's the plan. That if you guys get on and you like the story and you back it, and we can do part two and part three, I'm telling you right now what I already know that I'm doing. What me and this writer Caleb Turner is his name. Caleb is a young writer. He's very gifted. He's, got his teeth into part two and three. He already knows what's going to happen, and he loves it. He loves this series, and he's excited about it. And we're just bouncing ideas off of each other constantly. And I can tell you right now, the stories are so much better. Once this series is over, it's going to blow you away. I can't tell you right now, Brian, but I'm telling you, there's a whole lot more coming. You just don't understand. I think Heaven's Dakota. I'm almost excited to get part three over with because that's how much, so much fun, crazy stuff is actually coming from this, just from this limited series alone. So when I say
Wow.
springboard, I mean really, like I'm not just using it as a word. It literally is a springboard to a whole lot more. I actually have two series that I'm thinking of spinning off of this already that I already know that I can't mention right now, but where I'm already in the works with some staff. I have a couple of writers and I have another artist that's interested. So we're actually already forming the ideas going forward. I'm gonna do it regardless, whether I reach the goal or not. I'm doing this because I'm a writer. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I'm a
That's right,
writer.
man.
I have to create, and
It's
there's
got to
more
come out
stories.
somehow.
It's gonna come out somehow. I'm gonna get it out there. If I have to sell my car, if I have to go sell oranges on the corner to get the money to print it, I'm gonna do it.
Man, that's like dedication right there, man.
I love the story. I love the story and I love the universe. It's developing at a very quick rate. And then the amount of people that are in my DMs on Instagram sending me messages saying, they want to get involved, they have ideas, they want to work on it. I'm like, give me a second. Let me get part two and three out. But I mean, I have people that want to do stuff, and I have ideas. I'm ready to go, but I just got to get this series out to everybody because I don't want people to be left out. I don't want to rush it. I don't want people to. I don't want this thing to get out too quickly, and then it sort of just falls on top of each other. I want people to kind of like learn the characters and get
Like
used to the
absorb it.
characters.
Yeah.
Yes, absorb it. Because these characters in this one, the ones that I've introduced, and that was another reason why it took so long, is I had to find a way to, not just in part one, I'm talking about the whole series, how to give everybody a little bit of their own time so people can sort of see who they are. I'll admit it's not fair. Some are going to get a little less time in certain situations, but that wasn't totally not by design. That's because there's things I want to reveal later. And I didn't, you don't want to like unleash everybody's backstory in a three-part series. That's just crazy. You can't do that.
Oh
Uh,
no.
it would be convoluted and it would be boring. And then you see these graphic novels are like 140 pages, and it's like, who wants to read 140 pages in a book? Like, that's crazy. I can't. I don't have time for that. You got to give them a story, give them the characters that are interesting, and then build off of that.
And then those can
This,
come later.
yeah, those can come. You're leaving when you're doing a graphic novel that's too long. You're basically giving away story for no reason. Let them like the characters, learn the characters. And I think out of all the three parts, I think maximum, don't quote me on this, because there might be rewrites, there might be edits here and there. I think the most pages of any one of these books is 36 pages. Could be 38 for part three, could be 38. But that's, you want to give people their right amount of space and time to learn their characters and let the story flow and breathe.
Yeah.
But you don't want to give too much story, because then it becomes a movie in a book, and you don't want that.
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it too, because for me, like I was just gonna ask you too, like the process of creating Heavens Decoded, like in terms of the writing, drafting of the story, the art, like the color and the penciling, and the editing. What went into all that?
Well, so first of all, what we haven't mentioned today is the amazing work that Josh Harris has done on this project. I gotta tell you, I don't know where Heavens Dakota would be in terms of the timing of it and getting it out. If I was doing it on my own and trying to try it myself, it would have taken me 5 years or maybe six. He helped me so much with concept designs as far as like what spaceships would look like because I can't draw. I would come up with little doodles and say I want it to look like this, and then he'd recreate it and send it back, and we'd do that for like 2 weeks. We would work on spaceship design for just like 2 weeks alone. The
Wow.
learner gear, we worked on that for over a month. It was just prototype after prototype after prototype, and I was like, no, let's try that, and we leave it alone, and he'd say, oh, guess what? I got a different way of doing the arms. I got a different way of doing the legs. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And this went on for weeks. Josh Harris was very instrumental in helping getting this book off the ground, and he helped me visualize my ideas that I had in my head that I couldn't get on paper. He helped me put it on paper, and then he helped me think it through. That would look good. I don't think that would work. Is this what you really want? Is that what you really want? So he helped me figure things out. He was very important in that process, but there was a lot of concept work. I didn't anticipate that. I learned a lot from Josh. Josh has been in the comic book industry a couple of years, maybe 5 years, maybe longer than that. And he was able to like sort of teach me things as I was doing it with him. And there was a lot of design work and concept work that had to go in. Even after the story was partially written, I thought that was it. I thought I was done. And then I realized, wow, there's a whole lot more that it was stuff that had to be done. So my advice, if you're a writer and you have your own project and you've never done one before, get all your ducks in a row. Get all your design aspects in a row. Don't make the artist do all the work like I did to Josh. I drove him crazy. And you get your ideas down, even if they look ugly and they look goofy. If you think you want the costume to look like this, then draw it and Google it, and keep copies of things that you did, and then show it to the artist and say something like this. If you want the building to look a certain way, then do some doodles and some sketches, save it in your note, in your app, in your iPhone or whatever, save it and send it. Let the artist see what your thoughts are and let them figure it out. But if you don't have those ideas down, it's going to make your process take much, much, much longer. And that's what happened. We got stuck in process for about 6 months for design process. That was not,
Wow.
I'm not counting layouts or pages or anything. I'm talking about just concepts. So you want to do the homework first. You want to do that. You want to figure out what you want. If you've got a character who doesn't have superior powers, that's fine. If you have them wearing a suit and you have certain gadgets, design those gadgets on your own. Figure out what they look like. Come up with the names. Do all your work. But that was the most difficult part. I have to be honest. Heavens Decoded was not three parts. Heavens Decoded was one long book.
Oh wow.
It was one long book, and that's why I said what I said earlier. The 78 pages, it was 78 or 83, I think, after rewrites. It was like 83 pages. And then we decided we're going to break it into three parts. If I had done it as 83 pages, I don't think people would be interested in it. I think they would have liked the first part of it, and they would have said, okay, this is taking too long. So what we did was I took the book, I split it into three parts. I found the pages, and I said, okay, this is a good place to break it. Then I went to part two, and this is a good place to break it. And then I broke them up, and then I went back into part one, part two, part three, and individually went back in and fixed it so the ending flowed. And then I went into part two, and I made the beginning so that way it had a nice intro. It doesn't feel like I just chopped it. It feels like three separate stories. It literally is a movie a movie sequel, and then a movie third part. I literally made it three separate stories, and that's what I'm working on now. Part three is what I'm working on right now, which is we actually had part three. It was written. I just chopped off one and two, and now I'm working on part three and making it flow right. So part three has a nice beginning, has a nice middle, and a nice ending. The story was already there. The panels, the descriptions, the dialogue, but I had to make it so that way each story was its own separate story now. Instead of one long story, I've made it three separate stories.
Well, it's like a
So,
trilogy.
had a couple of pages here and there I had to adjust. It wasn't a lot. It's not a lot. I only, for part two and three, I only had to do a couple of pages over. And Caleb was helping me with some rewrites of part two. I had already written part two, as I said, but when I looked at part two again, I was like, when you're a creator, you can like your own stuff too much. So what I liked about Caleb is that Caleb was able to read my stuff and then say, I like this, but maybe try this scene this way. We'd play it out like we were the characters in the page, and he'd say, "Is this what this person would say? Is this how they would react to this?" And so I thought about it, and we discussed it, and then he said, "Okay, look, I'm going to do my version of this page, and I'm going to send it to you. And you tell me what you think." And then we went through it like that. And so he did a couple of pages on part two, and now we're working on part three right now.
It's
But
amazing.
yeah,
And like one thing that stood out to me was like the first part of the first issue where shaman is writing that symbol in the first part, and he said that the symbol stands for like a universal philosophy, and that a philosophy that says that one can stand for something bigger than themselves, and that's no lie, and that's a sign of courage. That was like one of my favorite parts that stood out to me. And I can also see
yeah.
that symbol on the captive's arm when Reggie's thrown into the cell with him when he's
That's right.
captured. And will we be seeing more of that symbol from the perspective of Reggie, who's studying these symbols, and also from the antagonist perspective as well?
Yeah, the symbol that you're talking about is also the one in the logo. I don't know if you can see the book or not, but it's a little cheesy there. That's the cover of the book. I
I
don't know
see
if you
the
can see.
sword and all that. It looks reminds me of Darth Vader.
Yeah, it's a sword. It's a sword made of lava. It's called a raska.
Rosca, nice.
Yeah, it's a raska, and it's that just means it means sword of fire in their language. That's what raska means in their language, sword of fire, and it's lava. And that symbol right there, that's the one you're talking about. That's the same one that she drew. The symbol is very important in this series. Again, Dr. Reggie Rockland is he is a symbologist. He's passionate about symbols. He's an archaeologist, but he specializes in symbols and hieroglyphics, and so that's why this is very interesting. But I can't give away too much. I'm not going to ramble on about that one because that's kind of key to the story. So that's why we picked that symbol. I picked that symbol for the logo because it has a lot to do with basically with Reggie's story. That's all I can really tell you. But yeah, so the sage is what you're talking about, and she draws a symbol in the dirt, and basically it's a universal philosophy, like you said, and it transcends, species of life, whether you're Earth human or you're an alien on some other planet, another galaxy. This symbol basically means something to many people across the universe. It just hasn't reached Earth yet. People don't know about it on Earth, obviously. Um, but I can't go into too much detail. I'm trying to be careful here.
Right.
I didn't rehearse this, so I don't really know how to explain this without saying anything. But basically, it's important to Reggie. That's all I can say. It's key to the story and it's key to the series, and people will understand that soon.
And when creating these symbols, did you like do like a little research on symbols like from the Navajo code talkers or from hieroglyphics from ancient Egypt?
I would love to give you a really cool story and say that I did some research on it, but I didn't. I just doodled.
Nice.
There's really no cool story for it. I mean, I knew I wanted to do something simplistic. So what I did was, the concept is stand. You can stand for something bigger than yourself. So if you look at the logo again, it is a small sphere with a smaller sphere. One can stand something bigger than themselves. So the one dot is bigger than the other one. So basically, what it means is that you can stand for something bigger than yourselves, meaning you could be this, but you could also be this. If you stand for something that means something, you could be this. You don't have to just be this, you could be this, or you could be this. You
Oh
understand?
wow,
So,
yeah.
so the symbol really isn't about the dots. It's about it's a representation of what it actually means. If you go back to what she said it means some standing for something bigger than yourself. It
That
didn't
makes
have
sense.
to
Like
be.
with the
It didn't
big
have
and
to be
then the
circle. Yeah,
small.
it could have been square and a bigger square. It's a representation. That's what symbols and languages are. Is that when I'm talking to you right now, my words aren't really. How do I say this? This is gonna now we're getting in the weeds, but words are really basically representations of our thoughts, right? The words themselves are not the language. The words are translating what I'm thinking and what I want to tell you, right?
Yes.
So like when we were cavemen, if I wanted to go like this, you would know that I'm saying I'm cold,
Right.
right?
It's like yeah, language.
It's universal. It's universal. And that's what that is. Those dots could mean anything. It doesn't have to be dots. It could be dots to that stage in the beginning and the prologue. It could also be squares, it could be triangles, something bigger than themselves. So big dot, little dot. And so on another planet, it might not be dots. It might be a different symbol. Because that's what languages are. Languages change. Just how you can say, zapatos in Spanish, and in French you say
Shoes.
sapat. Right. So I mean, the thing is that it all still means the same thing. It's still the same object. It just has a different name and different language. So the dots are the same thing. In her language, it's dots. On another planet, it could be different symbols. So it's not really about the symbol. It's about what it represents. It represents standing for something bigger than yourselves. Those dots just basically are the representation of that thought.
That is brilliant.
Thank you. But so
And
that's why I didn't put a lot of thought into it because for me, what I was trying to project was stand for something bigger than yourself. That's what came to my mind first, not the symbol. The symbol only became a representation of that statement. I had to think of something. What would that look like if I said stand for something bigger than yourselves? And the only thing I could think of was for some reason the first thing that came to my mind was a dot and a bigger dot. Stand for something bigger than yourself. If I see an old lady getting beat up, I'm gonna jump in
mm,
to defend her. I'm not doing it for me, I'm doing it for her.
right.
That's why Heaven's Decoded is about what?
Love.
Love. Stand for something bigger than yourself. Sacrifice. Give of yourself for others. And
It's
who,
pretty much being a hero.
and who does that? Exactly, that's what I was about to say. Who does that? A hero. Do you get it now?
Yeah, totally do.
I don't gotta tell you anymore. I'm not saying it.
That's I think that in itself is a hidden symbol too.
Stand for something bigger than yourself.
Yep. That's a worthy cause to live for too. I mean, stand for something bigger than yourself.
And that's universal. That's anybody, right?
Yeah.
And that's where Dr. Rockman's his journey is about. His journey is about learning about who he needs to be. Because what did we talk? We talked about in the beginning is about finding yourself. About how I became a writer again. I realized that I had been a writer all along, and I got away from it. It's about finding yourself. So that's what this book is a reflection of my own journey in a way too. Is that I'm sort of living what Reggie's going through, which is I went through all these things to come full circle to realize I'm a writer still. I can pretend to be this. I do recruiting during the day, but I'm not really a recruiter, Brian. I'm not. You know
Right.
that. I was a hotel general manager before that. I'm not a hotel general manager. I'm not. This is what I do. I'm a writer. It's not
It's
just
who
about
you
comics.
are, yeah.
It's who I am. Yeah. You have a job. What you do to get paid is not what you are.
That
You
makes
know, and
sense. I
so
mean,
and so
yeah, it
and,
just
and
puts
that
money
and that's
into
Reggie's that's what Reggie has to figure out. Is stand for something bigger than yourself. In other words, find out who you are. It's his journey about finding out who he really is and who he needs to be.
Sounds
That's the
like a
best word
hero's
I can.
journey.
Yeah, exactly.
And I feel like, we talk about symbols and all that, and like also too, like with what other organizations like prison represent and all that. And I wanted to ask too that
Do you like their symbol? The triangle.
the prisms.
If you had a prism triangle, yeah.
I mean, it kind of looks like government, like an ominous government symbol, like like yeah,
Yes,
we're the government,
absolutely.
you know.
Right. A little sort of Illuminati-ish, right? Because
Illuminati,
if
yeah.
you notice the triangle is broken. Did you notice that?
That's true, yeah.
It's not a complete triangle. There's a meaning behind that.
It's like the U.S. dollar or the $1
Mhm.
bill with like
Right.
the little pyramid, and then there's that eye, and
It's the
like
eye, right. There's a lot of that stuff. Actually, Dr. Rothman is not the only one fascinated with symbols. Because obviously, we talked about the logo and Heaven's Decoded, the circles. The Prism logo actually, I want to say, was actually created before Heaven's Decoded logo. The Prism logo, the broken triangle, what it signifies is it's a missing piece. So what are they doing?
they're finding the missing
They're
piece.
they're looking for the missing pieces. They're looking for stuff. They're being nosy. They're being nosy,
And like
and
speak, go
that's what the
ahead.
broken triangle means. Yeah, it's a missing piece. It signifies that they're always looking for something. Really, that missing piece.
Right. And speaking of organizations like Prism and the teachers, and we meet the Othox too as well.
Hmm.
And there's a panel where Kron tells about Menasor murdering the forefather Noag, and it got me thinking if we're going to see Menasor Noag in the future, perhaps.
Yes.
And
So, not to give it away, but yes. So the subtitle of the book is called "Shadows of the Ancient Architect," and we didn't talk about this. So Menasor is the architect, and that's going to be revealed in the series. But he is the architect. He's the ancient architect, and that's who he's referring to. There was an incident. So Kron, we're not talking about where in the book, but basically, Kron has a ceremony where he's getting his people riled up. He's a prophet. He's an emotional, spiritual leader. He's not, and this I think could be confused. He's not a political leader. He's their emotional leader, if you understand what that means.
more like
He's
a
kind of like,
zealot.
yeah, he's the kind of guy that he's not necessarily the leader, but he's who they turn to in their time of strife. They're basically exiles from their planet, and he's the one who's made sure that they survived. He's made sure that they got ships when they needed it. They don't have their own ships. They've had to steal them. They've had to barter for them. They've had to work for them. Um, he's fought and scrapped and scraped to keep those people alive. So they believe in him. They trust him. He's like a father figure to them. He's like a religious figure. He's not a like an outlaw. I don't want people to think of him as Darth Vader or something like that. He's not that at all. He uses his charisma to motivate people. He doesn't have control over them. He is violent, but he what he uses to run his people is their faith. They believe in him. It's an emotional thing. It's not that they don't look at him and they say, "Oh yeah, we could kill this guy." There's more of us than him. They could kill him if they wanted, but they don't because they love him. Heaven's Decoded. They love him. They love him. They revere him. So they would give their lives for him.
That's
So he
interesting.
doesn't have a fear of them turning on him or saying, "Oh, if I do something wrong, they're gonna kill me." They won't. They'll kill themselves first. So he's an interesting character. But what you're referring to is the ancient architect did something a long, long time ago that caused their exile, and this series will go into that. I'm not going to give everything away, but so the person you're talking about is Nog. Nog is the Othak's forefather. He is the one that Menasor killed, and they're angry. They're angry because they're exiles, and so they hate the ancient architect, and they intend to make him pay for what he's caused their people. And so Kron allows them. He puts the salve on their wounds. He makes them feel like they have a purpose, even though they don't have anything. Whatever they have, like I said, they're outlaws. They're basically outlaws. They're bandits. They steal ships. They kill people. They enslave people. The scenes that are in this first part, you'll see the stuff that's happening in the book. It's the Othaks that are running that. I'm not giving everything away in the book, but you've already seen it. Um, I think you're thinking about the prison scene. That prison
Yeah.
that has Kron's fingers all over it. So he has reach. He doesn't have his own planet, but he has reach. And so he's able to manipulate people and planets, some civilizations on planets that have fear of him. They fear his people. So he doesn't have to have a planet. He doesn't need his own planet. He can go wherever he needs to go. And we see that in this book in the first part.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I felt like too, like with all that, we see a whole lot of world building too, in a sense. I feel like we're gonna be introduced to a whole lot of worlds, which
Yes, you are.
makes for a great storytelling. Let me tell you, I love storytelling that involves a lot of world building.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I can't take all the credit for that. That's from me talking to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of. I went back to my childhood. There were times I got stuck in the story, to be honest with you, and I just went back and I just watched a bunch of old cartoons, read comic books. I even watched some romantic comedies. What I really wanted to do was, and I know that sounds shocking. What I mean by that is I wanted to get back to the heart of people and storytelling. What are things that drive people? What are people's motivations? What are things that make somebody feel pain? I wanted to break it down on the most simple level. And so that's where I found my story at. I found my voice when I started looking at it as, don't look at it as a comic book. Don't look at it as comic book characters. Look at it as people who might actually exist and what would be their story. What would be
That's
that person's
perfect.
motivation? What would make that person's motivation? Why would they be doing this? If they were exiles, and if I was part of those exiles, what would I be willing to do?
Wow.
If I was Kron and I had to motivate these people and keep them engaged where I don't lose them, because again, he has no actual control over them, just emotional. So if I was Kron, what would I do to keep control of those people? Well, we see that in part one. You can see what he's doing. You can see that from the page that he's literally pushing their buttons, emotionally
There's
pushing their
motive
buttons.
there. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. And so we all can relate to this. We know what a demagogue looks like. We've seen it before. We've seen it with Mussolini and Hitler, and that's what he's doing the same thing. And so the point of that is none of this is unique to just Earth. That it's possible in space there could be cultures where there are people who could be evil and they could be good and it could be gray, right? And
Yep.
so the real question is people need to ask themselves after they finish reading this book is, do they really know for a fact who the villain is? Do they really, really know? Or do they think they know? So
Ah.
you have to ask yourself, if you were in exile, what would you do? If you were in exile and you had people that followed you and you had nothing to give them and you didn't know how you were going to feed them, how would you keep them engaged so that they can stay alive? Is he really a bad person or is he just trying to keep them going? Those are questions that people
Perspective,
have.
man.
They have to ask themselves that. And again, I'm not going to tell everybody what's happening. And then again, it may not even be answered in this series. But I think that he's also, again, an interesting character. I don't mean that to sound like I'm patting my own back, but I found him to be more interesting the more I worked on him. I realized that there's a whole lot more layers to him and what his motivations are and how he operates. And then the discussion is people are going to learn about their culture. Why does Raz do everything for him? Why? Because in their culture, people of Kron's ilk, that class, it's about classism. Kron's class and his culture, they have one person assigned to them their whole life. Raz's is basically like his valet, he's his protector. So Raz cannot go against Kron even if he disagrees with him because he's assigned to him from birth.
Like a second in command, sort of an insurance policy.
Yeah, yeah, like serfdom in a way too.
Serfdom,
Serfdom,
yeah.
yeah. And so he's assigned to him for life. And so there's a lot of interesting things about their culture that's different. If you talk about the ceremony, we're not going to give it away, but there's a ritual at the end of the book. That ceremony, that ritual that's in the book, um, that's very fascinating. It's different. They basically call on their ancestors to make their weapons, to fortify their weapons.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going on. There's a lot, and it took a lot of time and a lot of. I got a lot of advice and a lot of ideas from people, and it was very helpful. I went and I did do some research on historical cultures from different parts of the world, religions and things like that, because Kron is a religious leader, ultimately speaking. He uses their faith and their beliefs that may or may not be all accurate. And the other question you have to ask is, does he know that it's not accurate? Is he using it to his advantage? And so there's a lot of stuff going on here. There's a lot, Brian.
Yeah,
There's a
totally.
lot. But yeah, sometimes I feel, this book and the world building you're talking about is so heavy. I did have to walk away from the project. I think I got burned out after I did do the three parts, and I knew that I had to break it up. After I broke it up, I walked away from the book, like completely from the project. I knew the art was being done, and I left Josh alone, and I just kind of like I unplugged from comics in general for like a month
Well,
because I
sometimes you
had
have to,
to.
you kind of have to like, rest when you have a burnout because if you burn out and you're still, going at it,
Yeah.
yeah, it just deflates.
And then I had to recharge myself for the promotional aspect of this book because it became a different thing because you go from the creative process to promotional, which is
Yeah,
getting people to know what you're actually doing and that you're trying to get something out.
get your
And
stuff out there. Yeah,
that was a learning process for me too because I had to learn how to manipulate and manage social media and it's a lot of work, man. I give kudos to everybody that's been doing it and I wasn't part of this industry 4 or 5 years ago. And I realized no, there was no Kickstarter, what, 10, 15 years ago.
oh
So I don't know what people,
no, yeah,
I don't know what indie comic people did, but man, I respect the hustle, man. There's so much work that goes into this. People think it's just writing the book or drawing the book.
it's so much more.
That's only like 40% of the whole thing.
I mean, a lot of it's just from what I've learned over the last couple of episodes that I've done. Like I've learned that it's a team process. Everyone has to
Yes,
be involved in creating a comic. It's not a whole
absolutely.
one man army kind of thing. I mean, it can be, but
I
for
just
the
want to
most
give a
part,
shout. I want to give a shout out to one guy who really saved this project. Well, actually, two guys. Obviously, the editor Chuck Pino. He's very well known in the indie comic industry. He did Welcome to
mm-hmm.
the Void. He's doing Belial, um, Essence House. He has a podcast. He does Essence House. But Jerome Gagnon from Canada, his lettering, what he did for this book, wow. He's also the one who helped me create the logo for Heavens Decoded. But he did the lettering in the book, but he's much more than a letterer. He really is a very creative mind. He's very experienced. He's been doing a lot of indie comics for a while, and he has a lot of work. A lot of people are after Jerome right now, so I got very lucky to have him on this project because he's very wanted right now. I got a great
Wow.
team. I got a really great team, man. Josh, Chuck, and Jerome. You talk about team. This book really is a reflection of everybody in this project. And then also the guys, the artists that I have doing the variant covers as well, and the T-shirts. We have quite a few artists that were really interested in working on this project in many different ways, and I was very fortunate. I was very fortunate
It's really
to have
awesome.
people. Yeah, it's awesome. I honestly I can tell you that this has been a learning experience for me, but it's been fun. It really is. I'm very proud of what we did.
Wow. So we're about to wrap it up right now. The last question I wanted to ask you is, what do you hope readers get out of Heavens Decoded? What do you want
Mm.
readers to take away or perhaps decode?
Um, I would say the most important thing is, and I think I can't give away everything in the story, obviously, but I think the first thing people should take from it, and they will probably, is it tells a story about people not taking people for granted. Don't
Wow.
take don't take people for granted. And again, I can't give that away. But basically, it's like we talked about several times, not to be over repetitive, but it's a story about love. It's a story about love of self, love of family, love of friends, love of your culture, your people, love from so many different angles. But it really ultimately is about love and not taking things for granted. That's basically what it's about. Heavens
Wow.
Decoded actually is, if I'm completely honest, the more I think about it, I feel like it's a self troll because really Heavens Decoded really just means it's about us.
I
The
like that.
Heavens Decoded, we think we're looking for the stars, we're looking for answers up there, but really they're right here.
Yep.
That's correct. And that's what it shows. All these different aliens and different cultures and different languages. When you get through all that, when you fight through all of it, you realize you come to it and you say, "Oh, it's really about us." But I didn't really want to tell people that. I want people to come to their own conclusion. I think that's what I feel. It's not for me to tell somebody else when they're reading it what they should feel, but that's what I feel. I feel like it's about us.
I like that, man. That's really awesome. It's poetic, and
Thank you.
right now it's going out on Kickstarter. The Kickstarter I believe is going to be tomorrow.
It launches tomorrow. You are Kickstarter Eve show. That's what this should be called, Kickstarter Eve.
Kickstarter Eve. Yep.
It's,
So
it launches officially at 5:30 p.m. tomorrow. You can go to my Instagram, Cypher Comics, or you can go to Heavens Decoded, at Heavens Decoded on Twitter. We have a website as well, heavensdecoded.com, that also has all this information. We have a trailer for the Kickstarter. There should be a lot of images, probably that people haven't seen on the Instagram. But yeah, it launches tomorrow. I'm excited. You can find the link to get a notify me on Instagram and on Twitter as well.
that's awesome. Well, that wraps it up for this episode of Heavens Decoded. Thank you so much, Ronnie, for
Thanks a
being
lot.
on.
This was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, man, it was fun discussing. I hope to have you back on again too, especially if you could,
Definitely.
when you
Absolutely.
continue on with this, man.
Part two. Hopefully, if we get this thing fulfilled, I hope everybody supports it. I have it ready to go, and I got a great staff. It's going to help me get this stuff printed and shipped out. Everybody's just waiting, so we're just waiting to see how this thing goes. If we get this thing fulfilled, I want to do part two by end of summer. I'm ready to get it out. So hopefully everybody, jumps on this thing, man. I really am excited to get this story out. And like I said, I will sell my car if I have to. I'll get it out. I have to get the story out.
Man on a mission, dude.
Thanks, bro.
All right, well, good talking to you, man, and thank you so much for being on.
We'll keep in touch. And by the
Definitely.
way, did you tell the people about the T-shirts I sent you?
Oh
You want to
yeah,
post
I
them
actually
up? Where
posted
are
it.
they? Show them up. Where
I
are
posted
they?
it on Instagram, but I can show you right now. Give me just a
Yes.
second.
Show the people now. Come on. Wait till you see this shirt, guys. Look at those bobbleheads in the back. That's so cool. I need to work on my studio game right here. There we go. There goes one of them. Hey! There we go. And there goes the other one. Yes. Yes, you can go to cypher.com and it'll take you to a link. If you go to the menu, it'll take you to the store to get the merchandise. You can also go to searnova.com, and my good friend Greg Mokin, who is a big part of this Kickstarter. He's an amazing guy, and let me tell you something, this platform is amazing. If you're a creator, you need to join us. They do amazing work for us. So I really just want to give a great shout out to Greg and Dylan over at Searnova, and Hector Borrero from Google Studios. I'm telling you guys, you need to go to our Instagram, go to Searnova Comics, and you're going to see a whole lot more interesting stuff. And you can get that T-shirt.
There it is. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on, man. And as I always say, constant listeners, and to you, Ronnie, stay ever so awesome. This is Brian for 16 signing out.